All right, Johnny, let's kick off. You're very welcome to
Cool.
another episode of Kickoff Sessions. So basically, my podcast from the very beginning was all around careers, young professionals, building out a good career habits, and obviously as part of that, you want to get fucking hired. So
Yes.
I want to chat to people like you. And I know you work in the executive space, but like it's just as applicable to younger people. And if anything, it's going to be better to get your experience because you're where we want to get to, I think. So that's what's going to be cool about today's conversation.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. First of all, I appreciate that. It's a huge opportunity to share what I know with people who don't get access to this kind of knowledge. I
Mhm.
do work with executives, but everything I say is applicable to anybody at any stage of their career. The reason I work with executives is they've got the money to pay me. So that's not it's not because the content isn't applicable to people at the start of their career. It's just that you're less
Mhm.
likely to want to spend a lot of money on me. So we catch you when you're later on, when you're over 100,000, you're feeling flush, then you come to me and say, how do you put a rocket into your career? But if you can do some of this stuff now,
Mhm.
you'll get to that magical 100K plus mark much, much faster. So happy to share.
Yeah, and that's the idea. It's about how to get hired, the idea for your ideal role faster, which is important. So like what's funny, I was thinking about this a lot over the weekend, and what's hilarious is like, you see those LinkedIn posts and it's like, oh, I applied for 450 jobs and then I
Yeah.
finally got my fucking job. We
Yeah.
should really be thinking about how to apply for a handful of jobs, maybe, and then how you got that job. What's your thoughts on
Yeah.
something like that?
Well, first of all, there's no way that that individual was relevant to 450 jobs. All right, that's just throwing mud at the wall. So that's the reason why that plan failed. However, we take it one step further on the program I run, which I'm not here to shill for, by the way. So there's no links for that program. But we don't apply for any vacancies at all. The people that I work with apply for exactly zero vacancies. And we position them and message them so well in the marketplace, the job comes to them. And there's a reason for that. And it's not snobbishness. It's not because they're the big I am and they don't want to be applying for jobs like other people. It's actually this. More than 50% of the senior vacancies are not advertised. So you can't apply for them anyway. You don't even know they exist. So how do you get hired for a job that you can't see? How do you expand the volume of vacancies that you can be considered for if you can't see them? Well, it's by them seeing you. And particularly in the last 18 months, so this is true across the entire spectrum, but in the last 18 months, hiring managers advertised a vacancy and then their inbox got crushed with a gazillion applicants because the market was long on job seekers and short on vacancies. And the hiring manager learned not to do that twice. Right? I do not want to be reading hundreds of. They're never going to triage that list of CVs. It's never going to happen. All right, and so if they're going to limit the number of people that they're going to have to consider for a role, the smart thing to do is not advertise the vacancy at all, but then instead go looking. And that process there means that if you don't know the vacancy exists, you're not going to get considered for it unless they can see you. So you've got to be visible and compelling. I'll talk a little bit about how to do that in a minute. But if you consider that, depending on how senior you are, and if you're the CEO, it might be as many as 95% of your vacancies are not advertised. Some between 50 and 100% of vacancies are not advertised. And that's a lot. Even at the 50% mark, you can double the size of the market that you're considered by making sure that they can see you. And if they can see you and they like you more than they like other people, and they see you more first before they find someone else, then you're going to get invited for the interview for a job that was not advertised. And the likelihood is, in fact, let me just back up a little bit. There's some psychology here that everybody should pay attention to. It's called buyer-seller integrity. Okay, this is going to make a huge, huge difference to everybody who's looking for work. Right. The first thing is this: if I'm a hiring manager, yeah, I don't have to advertise the vacancy. Yeah, I can just go looking instead. So we just discussed that. And so if you can't be seen, if you're not visible, if you're not compelling to me, then I'm not going to find you. And there's that lovely internet joke about there were twin brothers, one who joined the French Foreign Legion and the other one who appeared on page 7 of Google, and neither were heard of ever again. And it's a bit like that on LinkedIn. If I can't see you, if I scroll onto LinkedIn, I see 10 results per page. I see a couple on page 1 I like. I see a couple more on page 2 I like. I send off 3 or 4 messages. I'm done. I'm not wading through pages 7, 8, 9, and 10 or worse to find your profile. So you've got to be quite visible for me to find you and another to get applied for. The second thing is this, is that over the last decade or so, the the process or the transactional process has shifted from being a sales process to a buying process. Back in the day, when you and I were kids, we'd follow our dad into a shop. He'd have a word with the sales assistant, and the sales assistant would try and sell them something, which is kind of, what we went in there for anyway. However, nowadays, you and I don't do that anymore. We hardly ever get sold anything. Mm-hmm. Instead, we browse the internet for the things we like. We narrow it down to a supplier. We narrow it down to a product. And depending on what we're buying, we might even fling our credit card details on the screen and the thing turns up in the post. Salespeople don't even get a look in. They don't even know you're looking. They're blissfully unaware that you're out there on the internet looking around. Marketing is doing all the heavy lifting there. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So sales process is the wrong process for the hiring manager, and sales process severely limits the size of the market. But the third thing, and this is the really big one, is this. If a salesperson, if you're in the middle of a transaction for something, with a salesperson, and the salesperson thinks that what they've got matches your needs 75% or better, then they'll take a swing at selling it to you, because that's what they do for a living. They're a professional salesperson. It's how they make their money. I don't have any problem with that, by the way. However, if you remove the salesperson from the equation, as is the case online, when there's salespeople don't even know you exist, you're tooling around the internet looking at stuff they don't know, then actually buyers tend to be a lot more discerning than 75%. They're more like 95%. Because at 75%, they're like, yeah, it's kind of what I'm after. It's not exactly what I want. I'll keep looking. But at 95%, you get that ooh sound, like, ooh, that's exactly what I'm looking for. How much is that? And that's when the buying conversation comes to the surface. Fantastic. Imagine this from the hiring manager's perspective. We'll talk about empathy in a minute. The hiring manager's perspective, if you can make yourself visible and compelling to a hiring manager will only contact you for an interview if they believe you're about a 95% match to the role, because they are not going to voluntarily waste their time with somebody who's about a 75% match.
So how do you get out there? How do you get that exposure? Well, you know what I mean? As in, so you can do a couple of things like that and approach it. But even from my perspective, like someone who's educated, someone who's gone through all the hard grudge work doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get that exposure. And when I went to LinkedIn over a year ago now, I started plugging LinkedIn as much as possible. You never really know, is it paying off? You get me? Like if some recruiter messages me, I don't know, am I benefiting from building that personal brand? Now I am in indirect ways, building a podcast and whatnot, but from a interview and application process, how do you measure success?
And we measure it definitively on the program I run, which is that you get your ideal job and you get it faster and you get it for more money and you get it without having to sell yourself. Now that's a big ask to do all those things, which is why the program's expensive. But you can only measure it by results. There are things like the growth of your network and the engagement of your content on LinkedIn, which you can measure. And we can talk a little bit about LinkedIn in a minute. But there are 4 big channels to market from the hiring manager to you. LinkedIn is not the primary channel. Okay. Your personal network is. All right. If I'm about to spend a significant amount of money on somebody, say £50,000 or more to do something that you do, then there are consequences for me if I screw that hiring up. All right. It's not like I'm hiring a data entry clerk. If it doesn't work out, we'll just fire them and get another one. You're supposed to have quite a high impact on my business. And the more senior you are, the more you get paid, the more that impact is, and the more the consequences are for me if I screw it up. So the first place I go to as a hiring manager is my personal network. Hey, I'm about to hire myself a blah. Do you know of anybody who does that? Because that personal recommendation de-risks my hiring decision. So if you're a job seeker, know that and make sure your personal network is the first place you go to make yourself visible and compelling with that lot. Remind them of the value of you and that you're looking, so that when they meet somebody at the water cooler, in the lift, or wherever, who says, I'm looking for a blah, they're like, oh, I know somebody who does that. My mate Darren does that. Do you want me to put you in touch? Yeah, because that actually de-risks my hiring decision. So your personal network's first. The second of the 4 big channels, I would argue, is LinkedIn, because they can check you out a bit on there. And there are 3 big elements to LinkedIn, which I'll talk about in a second. The third big channel is your CV. Depending on how senior you are, the hiring manager may or may not jump onto a CV board and go looking for you. They may get your CV handed to them by somebody else, so that document's got to perform pretty well. And lastly, recruiters. Recruiters are expensive and in the UK annoying, and most hiring managers will go to them if they have to, but not because they'd love to. So in the order of things, I would say your personal network, your LinkedIn profile, your CV, and your recruitment relationships are the order in which a hiring manager will be delighted to receive your details. You talked a little bit about LinkedIn. There are 3 big elements to LinkedIn. If you nail these 3, then you've nailed it. Okay, so I'll demystify LinkedIn for everyone right now. First thing is your profile. okay, which is just the words on the screen, yeah, all of that stuff. And to make sure you're using the right keywords, because you imagine if you're a hiring manager, I've got a job description, I've printed it off, I've got my highlighter out, I've highlighted all the things I want to look for, I fling those keywords into the search bar and see who pops up, and I go wading through them. This is what happens. Okay, fine. So how do you make sure that you're one of the people who pop up? Well, you have to have the right keywords. How do I know which one of the right keywords, Johnny? I haven't got the job description. Well, actually, that's not that difficult, because what you can do is type in your job title and any ones that are very similar to it, and then look at the vacancies on LinkedIn and see what language they're using. I know, Darren, you're in project management, and those people who are in that space, the change management space, you could be a business analyst, you could be a project manager, you could be a senior project manager, you could be a program manager, program director, head of change, head of transformation, chief strategy officer. It's all bloody change management. Yep. But depending on the language you use will dictate the seniority of the role. Yeah, 100%. I worked with a person in mergers and acquisitions, and we looked for vacancies on LinkedIn for mergers and acquisitions, and a few came up, but not that many. We're like, well, there must be more than that out there. So then we put in M and A, A-N-D-A, M and A, and a few more came up, but again, not tons. And then we put in M ampersand A, that little squirrely and symbol, yeah. M and A, woof, hundreds of them came up. Like, clearly the industry refers to itself as M ampersand A. So when he's talking about his work on his LinkedIn profile, that's the keywords he should use, not mergers and acquisitions, not M and A, it's M ampersand A. You would refer yourself, perhaps as a senior project manager or a program manager, not necessarily a chief strategy officer, and not necessarily just a lowly PM. So you want to get the language right, and you can check that by looking at vacancies, and then make sure you're mimicking the same language on your LinkedIn profile. So your profile keywords is one, yeah.
And what's interesting about that is that I always think, like, how do I get recognized? Where does that come in? So I usually use like adjectives like delivered, implemented, managed, like controlled, or like developed along like the description. So let's say it's like Revolut, project manager, whatever. Then when within the description, I detail those adjectives. Now, I thought that was kind of helpful towards it. So is that where you're putting it in, as well as your summary? Or like, where do we
I'm going to say no, because on LinkedIn, the hiring manager won't be looking for those words. Okay. So you won't get a keyword match on those sort of dynamic adjectives. What they'll be looking for is, they'll be looking for project and manager. They might be looking for some domain stuff around retail financial services or digital financial services or something like that. They might look at banking software. These are the kind of keywords, and you can check out whether they're talking about digital, online, or technology by reading the vacancies and seeing what language they're using over there, and then mimic the same language. But those dynamic adjectives, no one's looking for a manager, because you're just going to get the whole world thrown at you as a search return. That's just too broad. So you've got your profile content. The second thing is the size of your network. There's all sorts of crap on LinkedIn about how to grow a network. If everybody who comments on this post follows each other, then we all have a massive network. Great. Of what quality, though? I have no idea who these people are. Some of them are Nigerian princes who've just come into a massive inheritance. And yeah, exactly. They're not really helpful to me. So how do you get a highly relevant and fast-growing network on LinkedIn? And LinkedIn have recently reduced the number of invites you're allowed to send out. They've reduced it by about 85%, so that's quite crushing. But there are things you can do. One of those is you can hook up an address book. So if you've got a load of contacts, I would strip out all the relevant contacts, dump them into a ring-fenced address book like Outlook or something like that, and then you can connect that Outlook address book to LinkedIn, and LinkedIn will email every single person on your address book and say, hey, Darren's on LinkedIn, you're in his address book, would you like to connect to him? They'll actually do an official invite for you, and there's no limit to that, so happy days. You can also go into LinkedIn groups, and you can message people. Now, you can't invite to connect to them, but you can say, hey, Darren, we're part of the same group. I'd love to share the rest of my network with you. Why don't you connect to me? And you're going to pick up a whole bunch of people that are relevant there. You can also, you can do invites. You can do about 100 a week. And so over time, you can build up a relevant network. Now, the benefits to this are several-fold, but one is when someone does a search, the LinkedIn algorithm will prioritize the people in that search according to how well they are connected to you, amongst some other criteria. So there's a trend It's not absolute, but there is a trend that more of your first level connections will appear higher in your search results than your second level connections. So you want to be as many people's first level connection as you can be, so that when they do a search and go looking for someone like you appear in their search results higher. Secondly, when you do content on LinkedIn, which is the third thing I'm going to talk about in a second, when you do content on LinkedIn, you've got more people who will consume it. What LinkedIn will do is it will throw your content out at about 10% of your network, and it will see whether or not that content is liked or not. And if you get lots of engagement, it'll give it more of a boost. And if it doesn't, if it just dies on the vine, then it won't send it to any more people. And obviously you want your 10% to be as big as possible. So the bigger the network you've got, the more people can see you and the more people will find you in their search results. This is good stuff. So growing a visible network. The third thing, though, is content. 99% of people do zero content. And literally 1% of the entire LinkedIn membership is responsible for 100% of the content, which is insane. If you think about it, if you think the job seeking market is competitive, you can get yourself a huge advantage by being one of the very, very few people who do any content whatsoever. You are not going to transform anyone's business with your content. That's not what it's for. But what it does do is, if I'm a hiring manager and I've done a search and I've got several people appear on my search results, and one of them is starting conversations on LinkedIn about, the domain that you're in, the industry you're in. Darren's done some posts about product management in fast growth financial services companies, and just, the trials and tribulations of keeping pace with market dynamics and all the rest of it. And whether or not the online marketplace is really for young hip people who, drink, whatever it is, the latest caramel double shot espresso drink, whatever it's Starbucks, or whether it is for the grey pound who've got all the money, but perhaps aren't as internet savvy. Who are you aiming at when you're doing your product management piece? And you can talk a little bit about that. No one's going to transform their business as a result of that, but I like the fact that you're in the middle of the conversation about the marketplace. Then I do other LinkedIn profiles I've seen that, they look about the same as yours, but no one's talking.
Yeah.
Well, this person's clearly confident about what they know. And so doing content and growing your network and having the right keywords on your profile are three things that you can do that will dramatically improve the performance of your LinkedIn profile when it comes to job seeking. So I'd urge you to do those three things.
And nobody's doing that. Like, nobody is pushing those, and especially younger people that are my age. I think that, like, firstly they look at LinkedIn, they're like, oh shit, it's like boring, whatever, and they like people rip on it from Twitter and stuff. But from my perspective, because I have a careers podcast, I always started building on it. And this is another question I want to ask off this week. But every day I've been pushing a content, one post, pretty much 5 posts a week, always. And I'd be talking about podcasting, talking about career development, and talking a bit about fintech when the time arises. But that my question off this is like, what sort of content should you be pushing? Like, should you be just looking at your industry? Because, I've actually seen posts before about someone like being like the thought leader on a Monday, then the motivational speaker on the Tuesday, and the person that talks about finance on the Wednesday. Should you kind of keep that consistent? Because like for me, I do career mentoring as well for young graduates. So there's a bit of that, but then there's also my podcast that I want to push, like our episode and clips from our episode. So they're kind of working in tandem. So I'm kind of saying like, is it a question of just getting anything out there at first, learning the skill of writing, or should you focus in on an area?
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about the skill of writing too much. Human beings like a good story, and it can be told by your friend down the pub who has no literacy whatsoever. We'll all listen to a good yarn. So it's not about your literacy; it's about telling the story. But for those people who are doing content, if you are a job seeker, this is specific to people who are looking for a job, then keep your content on point. The hiring manager could care less what you did at the weekend, whether kittens do the funniest things. No one cares, right? They're interested in hiring. They're in hiring mode when they do the search. So serve them up stuff that's relevant to them. Keep it within your career, okay? Once you've got your job and you're established and you're not looking for work anymore, then fine, by all means, bring a bit of personality in. But for now, you're a job seeker, keep it on point, okay? However, what content do you write? There's a really, really simple way of working this out, okay? And I do this. And I urge everybody on my program to do it, who are also as crap scared of doing content as anybody else. And these people are 45 to 55 and on 150 grand a year, and you're used to doing public speaking, who are still absolutely bricking it when it comes to content. So you're not remotely alone if you're thinking content on LinkedIn. What the hell am I doing? Is instead of doing some content straight off the bat, do this instead. Go on to other people's posts that are relevant, do a keyword search that's related to what you do, filter by posts, or a bunch of posts will come up, read them. And if you see one that's kind of relevant to you, comment on it, okay? And what you want to do is you want to comment and ask a question, get a conversation going. Darren, I just saw your post about a thing. I particularly like this and this. Have you considered this? Darren replies to me. I reply to Darren. And there's a little bit of engagement there, 2 or 3 sort of comments to and fro in the bottom. And then other people will see that who are also reading Darren's post, and they might give that comment a like. They might also choose to chip in with a bit of engagement. And I do that 3 or 4 times a day. And at the end of the week, I've done 20 comments. Most of them, I would say 3/4 kind of, there's a bit of banter, but not, that's it. They didn't really set fire. But 3 or 4 of those comments took off like a firework, clearly touched a nerve with people. Everyone piled in. And I thought, well, clearly that's the thing I'm going to turn into a post. That's how you use comments as content reconnaissance. And then you can go, well, I now no longer have to work out what to write. These 3 or 4 things that I commented on during the week were the popular things. I'm now going to work that up into a piece of content, stick it out there, because I know already there's an audience gagging to comment on that, and then you're away. So use comments as content reconnaissance, and that way you won't have to think about what it is that you need to write.
And that can keep on going, You could literally do that for your entire period until you get your own thoughts and you start thinking in terms of posts then, so it can benefit you that way. What I love about this is the fact that you're doing things that don't generate, that just generate inbound messages. And that's kind of important because it's like more time efficient and stuff, When you do get those inbound opportunities, and let's say for young people, like I've been pitched for roles that are obviously way more senior than what I've gotten, but I always just jump at the interview. Like I can give a shit. I'll talk to anyone. Like I'll jump at an interview and I'll try to sell my pitch. Always, I couldn't give a shit. But when you get that interview, some people just, shy away and they're like, oh, I'm not qualified enough for it. How do you think you should approach those initial calls where they're discovery phases? And like, what message should you try to get across? Should you be pushing your experience or should you be pushing the benefits that you can bring them?
Right. All of the candidates being interviewed for the job will have, roughly speaking, a similar level of qualifications, experience, knowledge, because they wouldn't get the interview otherwise, right? So you're not going to distinguish yourself much by having a pissing contest with the other job seekers about who's got the most number of years experience, who's got the most qualifications, etc. It's just, you're all roughly in the mix, all right? So lose that, all right? No. Hello there, Darren. Talk to us a little bit about why should we hire you. I've got a bachelor's in this. I've got 10 years experience there. I've got knowledge of widget 2.0. Yeah, well, so is everybody else today, because that's what the job's for, So ditch that mentality. And instead, ask yourself this one question. What is the benefit to my employer or the future employer, the one you're interviewing, of me doing those things? What's the benefit of having knowledge of widget 2.0? What's the benefit of having a bachelor's in widgets? What's the benefit of having 10 years knowledge of widgets or managing widgets or being a product developer, product manager in widgets? What's the benefit to them? Yeah. And the benefit will only be threefold. All right. So it's multiple choice. So that's nice and easy. One is it'll help the revenues go up. Yeah. So you're in product management. The reason why you do that is because you want stuff to go to market quicker and people to buy more of it. This is clearly a revenue play. Yeah. Or you want the cost to go down. Sometimes you're in finance or IT. Yeah, we built some technology that replaced manual labor, and that was cheaper, and we made fewer mistakes. So the remediation costs and the manual labor costs went down. Great. Or you're removing the risk of something. You work in financial services, and so maybe you're making sure that you're the right side of some kind of regulation. Yeah, fewer letters from the regulator saying, you've been an idiot, stop it. Fewer complaints from customers, that kind of thing. This is stuff you can measure. Yeah. How much did the costs go down? How much did the revenue go up? How fewer complaints do we get? And so leading with that is much, much more powerful than your knowledge, skills, qualifications, and experience. And I'll give you an example, a really, really basic one. And I learned this from a man called Laszlo Bock. For those of you who don't know who Laszlo is, Laszlo used to be the global head of HR at Google. His actual job title was FVP of People Operations. That's what he was, head of HR. He's long since made a ton of money working there and gone on to do his own thing. But whilst he was there, he was bothered by how crap Google's hiring performance was. It was about the same as everybody else's, which kind of bothered him because it's Google, right? They're supposed to be a top firm. And so he did what Google do best, and he treated it like a data exercise. And he pulled all the job descriptions and CVs apart, converted them into data, flung them into a data hopper, analyzed them, and then, bless him, about half a dozen years ago, published the results. And I'm a freak for a spreadsheet, so I ate that up with a spoon. And then we reverse engineered it because he was trying to help out the hiring managers, whereas I'm helping out the job seekers. So reverse engineered that data, which was not difficult. And we came up with a formula, which is the 5P formula. I won't give you the whole formula now because no one wants a maths lesson in the middle of a podcast, but there's this. Let's say I'm a supermarket cashier and there's a vacancy at my local Tesco and 5 of us go for an interview. We've all got 5 years experience. We've all got knowledge of being a cashier because that's what we do. I've got experience using that particular till system. So is everybody else being interviewed today. There's not much to, quite frankly, distinguish between us all. Yeah. It's probably a minimum wage job or close to. So I trot in. Now, everyone's going to say, I've got 5 years experience. I've got knowledge of the tills. I've got qualifications in customer services. Fine. That's all of us today. However, what's the benefit of all that stuff to the employer? Yeah. Now I know, because I'm savvy, that I look at what's the benefit of me doing my job to the employer. Well, the benefit is I get through customers, through the till so that they can bag up their shopping, bugger off, and we get through the next customer and keep on. And if I can just make the number of customers that come through the till just a tiny bit more than the next cashier, then I'm getting a greater throughput. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And when you're Tesco and you're running on a 3% margin, higher turnover is good. Yeah. Plus, if I'm getting through them quicker, we might not need to open up another till and have another person on the payroll sat next to me. So slightly uprated. So I know that on average, a till gets through about 35 customers an hour. I get through 37. Okay. Not much. It's only a couple of people, but over an 8-hour shift, that's 16. Yeah. And over 5 days, that's 80. And over the, whatever weeks are you, over 50 odd weeks a year, you're staring down the barrel of 4,000 people. Average basket size is about 110 quid, profit in that, et cetera, et cetera. I can do the maths. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So you're hiring for a cashier. And I plant myself down in front of you and say, I can help you increase the turnover of your store by in excess of £100,000 a year by being a supermarket cashier that does 37 instead of 35 an hour. But I want £1 extra per hour than the next person. Do you think you're going to turn me down for a £1 an hour extra in order to make 100 grand? Yeah.
Do you need to have those numerical figures, as in do you bring them in supporting, or do you try to do some research behind it?
Yeah, you do. You have to understand the benefit of your job. Why do you do what you do? Not how. I don't care. Banking up cash, that's all jobs. No one actually cares about the minutiae of your job, including the hiring manager. Right? What they care is what's in it for them and how much is in it for them. And I'll tell you what's in it for them: increased turnover. And I'll tell you how much: in excess of 100 grand a year. I have no idea how much. I can't be bothered to do the maths, but I know it's more than that. That's all I need to know. Right? It's not complicated. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so if you can walk in and plonk yourself down, you can be the least qualified, the least knowledgeable, and the most expensive, and still get the job. Mm-hmm. But you need to compete on different terms that are not skills, qualifications, knowledge, and experience. You need to compete on benefits. Cost, revenue, risk, and the quantity thereof.
It's kind of like, it's like any type of sales, like, you sell the benefits, you don't sell the processes. If you're going through being like, I'm going to help your company do this, and this, people are going to be like, fuck off. I don't want to hear necessarily that. I want to hear from day one what you can transform. And I guess that requires everyone to sit down and say, like, let's say if it is Google and you're going into the machine learning element of Google, you're going to be like, okay, do some sort of calculations and say, this is the value that I'm going to generate. And the numbers may be a bit ballpark, but I think that adds so much more character. And I've never heard someone say that, even myself, who would go into interviews and say, I've delivered this. See, I would have said, So if I work backwards, I would have said, I've delivered this and I've rolled out this product and rolled out that product, which is kind of like halfway through. But I'd need to just go the full way and say, this is what we can do. We can get to market, get ahead of all competitors and whatnot.
Absolutely. And what you can't say, particularly if you're relatively early on in your career, is that you personally did it, because you weren't, no one's superheroed their way to that solution. You didn't stick your pants on the outside and wear a cape. That's not, you're just not that senior yet. You can't do that. All you can do is just be honest. Okay. I led the product development contribution towards an increase in revenues by doing my thing, or I was part of the product development team that contributed these amount of revenues. You don't over-egg it, all right? But if you weren't personally responsible for something, and often the more senior you get, that's virtually never, because you're always in charge of a team of people that did. But you can say, I led the team that I contributed this particular function that was part of this overall win. Just be honest. But that person always gets the job. The other person is, but I've got more years experience than him, and I was cheaper. How the hell didn't you hire me? Well, because you're just a cost.
Yeah,
right?
I get you.
Whereas the other person makes me money or reduces my cost by more than they cost, or you've got to be a walking ROI, and it's not that difficult to work out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, imagine when you work at Revolut, huge firm, all right, big product development function. You're one of a team of people there, but I would imagine that what you do is bring products to market quicker, that get taken up in greater quantity because you get the product development right. Yeah, this is the point of your job.
Yeah.
And if you looked at how much revenues Revolut made and how much of that might have been attributed to being better at product development, you're going to come up with a conservative number that it couldn't have possibly have been less than. You have no idea what the actual number was, because who does? But you can say it can't have been less than that, Johnny. And I'd be surprised if that number was under £1 million.
Mm-hmm.
I help fast growth retail financial services companies grow revenues by in excess of £1 million. Lord only knows how much more, but it's got to be at least that, by leading product development effectively. Do you now? Come in and sit down, Darren. Let's have a little chat. That's a winning statement.
Yeah.
Right?
That gets you in the door, and that gets through that initial barrier. So like a lot of interviews though are like 4 or 5. Like I've actually done 5 interviews, actually odd enough, with Revolut, and with another firm I was with Accenture and consulting. I did like 4, I think. But again, like you go through multiple different kind of shit. So like let's say you're selling the benefits, that's great, whatever got through that. This isn't going to say like how long is a piece of string, but like what is a hiring manager really looking for? Apart from like the technical skills, because that would be role dependent. Is there a level of like responsibility, like confidence, self-assurance that they're kind of looking for versus
these are all how questions. I'll tell you what they're looking for is they're looking for their problem to be solved and the pain to be taken away. That's it. I'm a hiring manager. I've woken up this morning. I've got a problem. It's pissing me off. And I'd like a solution to that so I can stop managing that problem and go back to doing my day job, which is being a big swinging dick in charge of whatever. And the person who can come in and say, I will solve that problem and stop it hurting you, wins. That's it. So don't go in with a pitch, go in with a question. What's the big challenge facing the business right now? How's that impacting this particular department? How does that make you feel? Actually, the big challenge is we're not certain what product to get out to our growing senior market. And that's causing us some opportunity cost in revenues. And I'm having my ass kicked by the CFO, which is embarrassing at board level, which I could do without. So everyone's looking at me and wondering why we don't have better revenues. And everyone's going to ask because product development haven't developed a product that people want to buy. I don't really want that meeting next time around. Oh, okay, fine. Now you understand what it is the guy wants to buy.
Yeah.
So if we're able to listen to our customer base better and get a faster understanding of what products they want, and get an early win by giving a basic version of that so we can get some revenues flowing and build some customer loyalty on the basis of that and send you back into the board meeting without your trousers around your ankles, then actually this is a win. Yeah, I'm buying this guy.
Yeah.
And I have no idea how many years experience we've got, or whether he's got knowledge of widget 2.0 or whatever. This guy's understood I have a problem and it's causing me some pain, and he can solve that problem and make the pain go away. This I'm buying. And that's just all jobs.
Yeah, and that's unique to every single problem that ever is out there. Yeah. When they're going looking for people, I always think about that as well, because I always think, when you're trying to get the interview, trying to get the job offer, fair enough, you're kind of in a deficit a small bit, but really when you get that offer, then you're kind of in a surplus because like they want you, they need you, and they're trying to get you to sign on. So like in that particular instance, like how do you approach like contract negotiation, for instance, like as in, because hiring managers or recruiters will always be like, oh, fuck, we can't pay you more than 50K or 40K or 60K. Yeah. But like, there's 2 things happening there. So one, you're kind of shitting your pants that there's someone else that they've given an offer for, or they might rescind the offer or whatever. Like that's just people's like kind of like worry. But then there's also the other element of there may not actually be additional cash on the table, or how would you approach it? So like a lot of people will ask, oh, is there any more on offer? And they'll say no, and then they'll just take the offer.
Yeah. So let's break that into 2 parts. One is mindset and one is reality. The mindset is this, and this is a hard mindset, particularly if you're early on in your career, but you must understand this. The reason why they're asking you what money you want or what money you're on in your previous job or whether or not you'd be interested in taking the job is because they want to hire you. Nobody asks the price of stuff that they don't want to buy. All right. You are the prize. If you didn't make them more money than you cost, if you didn't save them more money than you cost, if you didn't mitigate more risk than you cost to mitigate, then they wouldn't hire you. So you are, by definition, a walking ROI. Right? This is just true of all people in work. If you weren't, they just fire you and save the money. So by definition, you're a walking ROI. So you are the prize. The job is not the prize. You are. Okay. You're the ROI. So somebody else's job that pays similar money, the jobs are interchangeable there, whereas you bring profit, whether it's by saving more cost than you cost or bringing more revenues, etc. So you are the prize. They're after you. That needs to be your mindset, which is a confidence leap. All right. The second thing then is, if you are the prize, are they going to let that prize go for the sake of saving a few £1,000s? All right. And I've tested this. I was unusual in my executive search career that I wouldn't let new employers, ones that weren't known to me, so new to me, hire any candidates through me unless I sat in on the interviews. And that's because I couldn't trust that the hiring manager was any good at doing interviews. And that's my bread and butter. That's how I put food on my table. And so I would go in and sit in on the interviews. Now, I clearly couldn't contribute to the decision about whether they hired someone because I had a vested interest. And those recruitment fees were pretty heavy. But what I could do is make sure they asked better questions. So things I used to hear would be, oh my God, did you see that guy's shoes? I'm like, no, you absolutely cannot make a decision about whether you're hiring someone based on their shoes. That's a no, right? Oh, did you hear he's an Arsenal fan? We can't have another gooner in the office. Like, no, that's absolutely not the basis on which you can make a hiring decision. I'm knocking that on the head. And so there's all sorts of crap there. But the other end of it is, once they've decided they want to hire someone, never ever, and I've sat in on thousands of interviews, never ever did I hear this: I was gonna hire, but now I've heard they're on £5,000 more than we had in our budget, or the last candidate we just saw. I'm gonna hire the second place candidate instead and forego the massive win that the first candidate was going to bring in order to save £5,000. No hiring manager is that idiotic. I've never seen it. All right. Now, if what you're asking for is in line with the market and the job and the value you bring to that job, so you need to understand the benefit and the quantity of benefit, then stick to your guns. You're always going to get the money. No one's going to turn you down. I was going to hire Darren, who's going to make us £1 million worth of product development, but now I hear he's 10 grand more than the next person. Fuck it, let's just lose the £1 million and save the 10 grand. Said no senior hiring manager ever. All right. So you're going to get your money. All right. Just stand there and wait for the penny to drop. However, if you're stratospheric out of market, then just go and apply for a more senior job. Yeah. Right. This job's too small for you. Move on. Don't go chasing the job just because it's in front of you. Right. If it genuinely can't afford you and they really are paying about right for the market, the job's too small. Go for a different job.
And how should you line up what the market actually is? So like, you can go into LinkedIn, like salaries or some shit it's called, and check roughly, but I know that can kind of vary. Or should you always look at your existing salary and add a percentage value onto it?
No. So the two things there. One is research. How do you do that? Glassdoor is a place where you can get numbers. LinkedIn is a place where you get numbers. That employer that you're interviewing at, their HR function may even have a range, right? Depending on how big the employer is, those ranges can be absolutely set in stone. When I used to work in financial services recruitment, I'd ring up HR and they say, this is an ED level role, and EDs are paid between 125 and 175. It's a pretty big range. But I understood that if my candidate wanted 180, this is going to be a stretch. Right? And so you sometimes HR will just tell you. Recruitment, the recruitment someone should have an idea. All right. And quite frankly, you're in the market. You know what your friends have paid. You've got a ballpark understanding. Okay. So there's 3 or 4 reasons there. However, that whole adding 5, 10, 15% to your last salary just makes your career crawl along at a snail's pace. Do not do that. Okay. Your last job was different to the one you're applying for. The benefits you could deliver were different, and therefore the salary is completely irrelevant. However, the value that you bring to the job you're being hired for right now, the quantity of that benefit, is worth X, and that's within the market. And that may bear absolutely no relation whatsoever to your past job. Yeah? You might have joined them 3 years ago, added 5% a year to your salary, but have learned 50% more. You need to reflect that in what you're about to do next. So it's always based on the job you do, not the job you've done. And if they, and you can remind them of that, Johnny, can you tell me how much you were paid in your last job? Actually, my last job's completely different to this one. And the value I could offer them was completely different. However, I believe that the person who can do the job you're talking about today and contribute, in excess of £1 million worth to your product development aspirations would look between X and Y. X being the number you want and Y being about 20% more. Okay. So if you wanted 100 grand, you say somewhere between 100 and 120. For me, because I really like this job, and you guys, I don't need to be a hard ass about it. I'd happily come in at 100. So what you've benignly done there is chop the knees out from underneath them to negotiate, because you've already negotiated yourself down by 20 grand to the number you want. Yeah. And it's within reason for the market that you're in and the job that you do. And what you said is the reasons why you're prepared to drop that number is because you like these people and you can do this job well, which further feeds into a thing called confirmation bias. So the hiring manager believes they've got the right person. You've just told them they've nailed it, absolutely bullseyed it with their choice. It's very hard for them to then sort of go against their own choice when you've just told them they've nailed it. I think I've got the right person. No, you've absolutely nailed it. Now change your mind. That's quite a tough thing for them to do. You've just come down 20 grand because you want to do this job. Like, well, where do we go from here? We're going to have to give them 100 or forego the £1 million worth of benefit and hire candidate number 2's on 90. Yeah, I'm just not taking the 10 grand risk. I'm not stupid. How do you think
what I like about this as well? What I love about this as well is the fact that like you're kind of setting them up as in terms of like, you're taking the first step, and it's not like you're being like, oh, thank you so much for the role. I really appreciate it. Like you're dictating the conversation and you're driving where it's going to go, which is usually what people, maybe it's probably because they're job seekers, like they're actually like, really, really wanting a role. They could be out of work for a bit of time, so they're kind of happy to take and compromise. But I like your approach, because your approach is very much similar to mine. Like obviously yours is like it on steroids, but it's the same concept like that. You're taking the first step first, you're setting it up for them, and then they'll either meet you or not. If they don't meet you, what I often say is like, fuck that. Like if they don't want to give you the role you want, someone else will. It could be 6 months from now or whatever, but you don't need to jump at things. I think that's the biggest fear.
We covered quite a bit in this. I should mention that in the show notes there's a free ebook which people can download from themselves, about 30 pages, but it covers a lot of this in a bit more detail. So if you're thinking this all sounds very breezy and easy on the podcast, but how do I actually do that? There is quite a lot more detail in that ebook, and you can help us out to it. Yes, you're going to end up on my email list, but honestly, I won't be spamming you, because I deal with people who typically are on over 100,000 a year. They do not tolerate a truckload of email, so we tend to be quite sparing with that. So get yourself that ebook and have a read of it. It'll take you about half an hour to read, because it reads like I speak, because I actually dictated it. So it's a nice conversational book. But in there's all those things I talked about in terms of LinkedIn, the 3 big elements: your profile, your network, and your content. CV, we'll talk about that in a minute. Interview, there's an entire playbook for the interview, which is a separate ebook. But yeah, it's all there. It's all completely learnable. There's no art to it. It's pure skill.
Yeah, of course. And again, it's also experience. I think it takes a bit of fucking time to get your head around it, and especially as you get a bit more senior, because like where I'm at and where a lot of people are at now is like taking that leap from being, graduate, oh my God, thank you, to dictating these conversations and driving things and delivering stuff. And I don't know, positioning yourself as senior versus just accepting what's given to you.
Yeah, and I don't get too hung up on hierarchy, but it's positioning yourself. We call it a value proposition. What is the benefit of hiring you? And there's only 3 benefits to all businesses. When you drew a business as a kid, if you ever did, it's basically a factory. And there was just raw materials in one end, some value added in the middle, and some finished product going out the other end. But when you look at the finance of that, you've got revenues tend to be around the front door. So you've got your sales, product development, marketing. They tend to hang out there. That's where the money gets made or gets manifested. Then in the middle, so let's do the back door actually first, a second. So you've got front door, revenue, back door, costs, finance, IT tend to hang out there. And in the middle, you've got all the risks that business have: operational risk, regulatory risk, health and safety risk. There's a ton of them, legal risk. And pretty much that's where everybody's employed, in the sort of the middle bit of the business. And so that's all businesses. So regardless of what industry you're in, either make money, reduce costs, or mitigate some kind of risk. Your job will be aligned to one or more of those 3. If you're the COO, it's probably all 3. But that's it. If you haven't understood what the fundamental purpose of your job is, then you're going to struggle to articulate a value proposition. But once you've understood what the bottom line of doing your job is, revenue, cost, or risk, then you can stick a number on it. That number does not have to be remotely accurate. It just has to be a minimum that it can't be less than. Yeah. I would imagine it's virtually impossible for you to look me in the eye and tell me exactly how much revenue Revolut make as a result of having you on the product development team, because there's just no way of quantifying that. But what
100%.
you can say, it couldn't possibly have been less than this.
Yeah, I get you.
And
That's
that
what you're
minimum
bringing.
number, that's the number. It can't be argued. Loads of headroom at interview. You're probably going to come up as better than that during the interview process. But in the meantime, I've got a value proposition, which is revenues up by an amount, which beats every other candidate and is worth paying the 10 grand extra for, even if you've got less experience and fewer qualifications, because I want that. I don't want an extra year's knowledge. I want the benefit of an extra year's knowledge, which no one else has been able to articulate to me.
Yeah.
Apart from this one person who said, your revenues go up by at least this. Well, I'm buying that all day long.
100%. 100%.
There you go.
The last area I want to chat about, which I think is going to be, it kind of plays on that area as well, is about negotiating existing contracts at a company. So you actually alluded to it earlier where you were saying, 5% changes in the salary every year. Like I often find that if you stayed in the company, you're going to make less money than if you move company. I often find that, but it's also a bit of a, for me as well, like as in when you're staying in a company, you're learning a little bit more because you're getting a little bit more experience and whatnot, and you're getting more cemented in a role. So when it does come to salary review time in a company, it could be January, March, whenever the financial year is, sometimes people will say, oh, we can't give you the 14% we plan to increase. You're going to get 7% increase. What's your approach to negotiating those contracts? Because they kind of have you ball and chain slightly. Because
actually they don't, but let's just break a couple of things up here.
Cool.
First of all, money was not in the top three things that somebody wanted when they walked into my exec search office back in the day as a reason for why they wanted to change jobs. So I wouldn't, there is a premium that the worker will pay in reduced salary for working somewhere that they love, with a boss who's great, where they're learning masses, which is the number one thing. So if someone walked into my office and say, I want to get a new job, why? I've run out of things to learn. I've topped out. I'm doing the job with one arm behind my back. I'm bored. That was the first reason. Second reason was my boss is a dick. Often what happened, there'd be a boss change, new boss would come in, different culture. Yeah, just, doesn't work for me. Third thing was the opportunities to advance. Okay. My boss has been there 20 years and is going nowhere, and that's my next job. All right. Fourth was money. So start measuring your career in those terms. Is, can you learn? Yeah. Are you happy? And can you develop? Yeah. Can you use that learning to develop? If you tick in those three boxes, then fine. We'll talk about the money. So money, do not, for the love of God, wait for the annual appraisal. What a colossally stupid idea that is. That is absolutely a spreadsheet exercise which you have zero control over. None. And there's going to be an across the board raise. We might flex it up and down a little bit depending on the department and the individual performance, but it's going to be marginal. However, during the year, I've just learned this. What can I apply it to, boss? Actually, there's this project over there. Could you go and do that? Great. When I've done that, I'll have been upskilled. What can we talk about in terms of my new job? Well, actually, we could probably make you from project manager to senior project manager. Great. What's the going rate for a senior project manager? Oh, that's about 20 grand extra. Great. So why don't I go and do that project and then go and do the senior project manager job for 6 months and see if I like it. All right. And if at the end of 6 months I've done it well and want to continue doing it, you'll put me on a senior project management rate. Yeah, sure. And you'll get it through promotion rather than through an annual raise for just being around. All right. And so that's how you do it. It's intra-year. Don't do an annual appraisal time. That's just, it's very hard for a hiring manager or for a line manager to buck the trend by saying, yeah, I've been told I've got a budget of about 5% to give everyone, but I'm going to give this one person an extra 20 because they've asked for it and I think they're worth it. It's very difficult to break that mold for them. Don't ask them to do it. Give them something easy to do in the middle of the year. Give them a reason to promote you. Extra responsibilities. It doesn't even have to be a title bump. Maybe you're already a senior project manager, but there's quite a wide range within there, isn't there? Yeah. More people to look after, bigger projects, more budget. Fine, you're going to get paid more money. It's just move your job on rather than your job title. Sometimes the job title will come with you anyway, but
exactly. But I think it's about being proactive, because a lot of people will be reactive when the promotion, well, not necessarily promotion, but appraisal comes, and they're like, oh fuck, I only got like 3% or whatever. But the common theme out of all of this is just being proactive, staying on top of it, documenting your work, really showing the value you can provide, and the actual the revenue you can provide as well. More importantly,
set a route map. Make it easy for the hiring manager to do, or the line manager to do, your boss to do, by doing in the middle of the year rather than at appraisal time. And set that route. Right, I will go and apply my newly learned skills to that project. Once we've done that well, I will then move into a more senior project management function. When I've done that well, you will give me the senior project management money. Yeah, great. Document that and then just go do it. By the time he comes around to it, it's kind of a fait accompli. You're there already. You set that out 6-9 months ago. And I've just come to the end of the 9-month journey and 20 grand extra. And 3 months' time, it's annual appraisal time. Everybody else gets 3%. I've got 20 grand. And I got it 3 months ago. And there's a reason for that. We set out on this journey and we didn't wait for appraisal time. I did a totally different mechanism. Annual appraisals are just not so much.
Tick the box exercise. Johnny, I'd like to say a massive thank you. Can I get where people can find you? Give us a little overview.
So easiest place to find me is on LinkedIn. It's just /Johnny M Walker, and the link to that will be in the show notes. If you want to get some more stuff from me, download the ebook for sure. For those of you who are brave enough, and that won't be everybody, and that's okay, it doesn't have to be, I run a free Facebook group called the Executive Edge. And the Executive Edge Facebook group is for people who are putting a light under their careers. And we don't just talk about changing jobs, we talk about pay rises, bonuses, promotions, mindset, resilience, confidence, public speaking. There's a whole bunch of stuff you might end up having to do. There's nearly 1,000 people in that group. They're all very serious people. So it's quite a well-behaved group. Brilliant alumni to belong to. All right. If you want a decent network, who doesn't want 1,000 6-figure earners as best buds that you can share and learn from and collaborate with? That's a pretty decent group to belong to. Otherwise, when you see me on LinkedIn, by all means, swing by, connect and say hello. And I produce a lot of content out there, and a lot of it's free. I don't have to monetize everything that comes out of my mouth. I do a lot of good stuff. Regularly, I do masterclasses on how to do a brilliant CV, or how to do a brilliant LinkedIn profile, or how to do a brilliant interview. They're all completely free. And if after consuming all of that, you think this guy really knows what he's talking about, and I definitely want the help, then great, come to me and we'll talk about it. For everybody else, just take the free help and run. I'm happy for you.
Of course. Thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it.